When people perhaps think about the Vietnam veteran, they have kind of a Hollywood-produced image of that from one of the more popular Vietnam films. But, you know, Virginians did so many things during the Vietnam era, whether they were aboard a ship, whether they were working in a hospital, whether they were flying a helicopter, whether they're, you know, down in the jungle or on a tank. It's just, you know, if you ask them, you know, how was your time in Vietnam and since, you're going to get 50 different answers if you ask 50 different veterans.
Biographical information about yourself, and then I'll ask you some questions about your experiences, and you can say as much or as little as you'd like about any of the questions that I have for you.
Okay, well, you know, I could carry on.
Action. All right. If I could just have you state your name and your hometown here in Virginia.
Richard Tunstall, Montvale, Virginia.
My name is Bill Cleveland. I live here in the city of Alexandria, Virginia.
Florence Inez Dunn, Yale, Virginia.
Frank Zahar, and I live in Virginia Beach, Virginia.
There is no singular Vietnam veteran experience. And that's one thing we really want to showcase in this exhibit. Any preconceived notion they had about, you know, what a Vietnam veteran is and what they experienced, you know, there's a lot more to it. The idea behind our 50 Years Beyond the Vietnam Veteran Experience exhibit was based on the notion that the Vietnam veteran perhaps has not always received the recognition, the attention that they perhaps deserve. The Vietnam veteran kind of lives in this area that's been overshadowed a little bit by the Greatest Generation, and then more recent events, events like the Persian Gulf War and 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan, which have received a lot of media attention. The fact that these veterans have been living as Vietnam veterans for half a century, and it's time that we put the spotlight on them, and it's time that we learned what that has meant to them. What has it meant to them to be a Vietnam veteran?
So what has it been like living as a Vietnam veteran for 50 plus years now?
The last 20 or 25 been the best, because people don't realize that when we came back from Vietnam, it was not an experience of joy, it was protest.
I get sad.
We was mocked as we got off the plane. We didn't get the recognition that we should have gotten.
It was kind of tough. I had a little bit of trouble identifying with my friends, or perhaps they had trouble identifying with me.
And we bumped into some old high school friends, and they looked at me and they said, "Hey, good to see you, Jack. You've been sick?" And I realized I'd lost about 25 pounds. I said, no, I'm not sick at all. "Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's good." I said, "I've been in Vietnam." That stopped the conversation. They didn't want to talk anymore. They didn't want to hear about Vietnam.
And I was approached by the director because I have some experience working with like primary sources and historic research and interview skills. So he asked if I would be willing to be involved in the project, and that way we could have a couple different people that could do interviews and a couple different people that could scan the archival material and work with check-in.
Because I love talking to the veterans and just having that personal contact. It's an honor that they trust us enough to share their stories and their experiences and their emotions.
We had one gentleman who served in the Marines and who still carried in his wallet a list of all of the men in his unit that were killed in action in Vietnam. And him offering to take that out and show it to us in the interview was a really, really powerful moment for me. The fact that it's 50 years since he's been in Vietnam and he still thinks about everything that went on there and the people that did not come home with him.
So Dr. Mountcastle, he completely out of the blue actually got an email inviting me to be part of this process. and I didn't quite know what to expect, but he just gave me a sense that he needed portraits, and that was it. And so to be asked to do this, I mean, oh my goodness, I think it's so important to document history and honor the folks that came before us. And so what you see here is two setups. One is my standard studio that you'll find if you walk into my little cozy home. And then experiment on the other side, and if it comes out, they can use it. If it doesn't, delete, 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 right?
So the venue selections have been incredibly unique. So we did the first set out of the Virginia War Memorial. We interviewed out of a brewery in Hampton. We were in Northern Virginia. And then in Roanoke, at the American Legion post. They were just really interesting places to get to talk to people. So the questions that we're asking the veterans were mostly come up with by Clay. He had an idea of what he wanted the project to look like and what he wanted kind of like the overarching theme of the exhibit itself to exemplify when talking about Vietnam veterans.
And I think that's the great thing to take away, is that even though they've gone through all of these negative things in their life, they still see the positive change that they made 50 plus years ago.
This means a lot to be able to capture and just contribute. I mean, a fraction. We're contributing to a fraction of the fabric of history, if you think about it.
We're still surrounded by history and getting it preserved while we still have it.
Just to see the response and know that so many of them were just waiting to be asked.